YouTube, I'm Mr. Fragglespock, and this is my belated thoughts on Doctor Who Series 9, Episode 2, The Witch is Familiar, written by Stephen Moffat and once again directed by Hattie MacDonald. In my opinion, the best Dalek story is the one that explored the conflicting ideologies between the Doctor and the Daleks, and by extension Davros. But this story did something different in that it explored the parallels between the Doctor and Davros's characters rather than their differences. I love this angle as it leads to some of the most profound dialogue I've heard in a Dalek story in a long time, and allows us to see a side of Davros's character we haven't really seen before. The only stories I feel have really explored Davros's character in this way before are the Big Finish stories. So it's good to finally see this side of the Davros character explored on television, as I feel giving villains more depth is something that Doctor Who excels at when it rises to the challenge. This exploration of the Doctor and Davros' character not being explored enough was one of my big criticisms of the episode last week, but this time round I feel they gave it the breathing room it needed, and it led to some wonderful, intimate, tender scenes between the Doctor and Davros, and really seeing these two finally get along and finally is actually something of a cathartic watch. These two have always had a lot in common, and seeing them share an intimate moment was strangely heartwarming for me. Admittedly, this led to some problems later down the line, but I'll talk about that when we get into spoilers. Clara and Missy are great in this episode. Their comedic interplay was another thing that I felt didn't get enough time last week, and it is the highlight of the episode, but, well, at least from a comedic standpoint. The dialogue and the back and forth between these two is great. I could listen to them bicker on, and I really hope that Missy's going to start to have a more active, regular role in the series, as opposed to just being an occasional walk-on like she has been. Because if it leads to this kind of humour, I'd be more than happy to see it again. Stephen Moffat admittedly adds one of his little frivolous stories in, where he'll throw in a zany tangent about one of the Doctor's previous adventures just because he can, but this time it's used for story reasons to explore the main theme of the story, or at least a theme. The theme, as I said, is the Doctor's character. Much like I said in my Magician's Apprentice reaction, this is a Doctor-centric story. A lot of deep questions are raised about what kind of character he is and what makes him fundamentally the Doctor. And this is brilliant because Stephen Moffat really gets to get down into what he loves writing about, which is the Doctor as a person. When he actually explored the Doctor as a character were, in my opinion, the highlight of the Matt Smith era. And he's not writing just zany, miscellaneous stuff like he was even in the tank scene in The Magician's Apprentice. He's writing stuff that actually means something, and it comes across in the material. Real. Making Davros a sympathetic villain was another thing I feel like he's wanted to do for ages, and it's something I've wanted to see for ages, so it really resonated with me as a fan. Now, in order to talk about my main flaw with the story, I have to go into spoilers, but I think now enough people have seen the story, so I can go into spoilers without really angering anyone. Ultimately, the Doctor decides to help Davros prolong his life and give him another chance. This proves to be a bad decision, as Davros turns out to be faking it, which makes any emotional investment I felt in their previous intimate dialogues, where they actually got along, something somewhat meaningless. Don't get me wrong, I expected Davros to be faking it, but that doesn't take away from the fact I was slightly disappointed when he turned out to be faking. because I felt like we were seeing something different, and ultimately when that just regresses back to the status quo and turns out to have all been a lie, it's something of a letdown. And I suppose, ultimately, anyone who talks about this story has to give their 2 cents on the ending. I think this is the ending I thought they were going to go with, and it's the ending I wanted them to go with, ultimately. It would have been massively out of character for the Doctor to actually kill a young Davros, and this was ultimately the better alternative. The cliffhanger was naturally resolved the exact way I thought it was going to be, but hey, Stephen Moffat, you can't always be perfect. I don't know whether I'm proud of myself for guessing the cliffhanger correctly or disappointed because the show's become that predictable. But that final shot of the two of them walking away together in the fog was very impactful for me, and I felt strangely optimistic going forward, to the point where I'm actually reluctant to listen to I, Davros in case it sullies this really quite emotional resolution. Apologies for the brevity of this one, but I feel I don't really have much to... Whoa, sorry, dropped the camera there. I feel like I don't have much to add from my Magician's Apprentice review. Everything that I liked about Magician's Apprentice has been expanded on very well. Which is familiar, whereas everything I didn't like has been toned down a little bit, which ultimately makes this the better quality half of the two-parter. Or even though some people have disagreed with me and said that because of the build-up in Magician's Apprentice, it's actually the better episode, but I'm gonna have to disagree. I give Which is Familiar itself an A, and I think on the whole I'd probably give the two-parter itself an A-. Still, definitely one of the best stories in recent memory. Some really profound things to say, a really different, subversive story, the kind of complex, multifaceted, multi-layered writing that we haven't had in ages, and it just felt like a complete breath of fresh air. I really hope this is the standard Stephen Moffat's going to keep up for the next 10 weeks? 10 weeks, sorry. The next 10 weeks. And I really hope Series 9 is going to be this well written. I am, of course, looking forward to next week's episode because it's written by Toby Whithouse of Being Human fame. So I'll see you all next week for Under the Lake.